Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we talk about what's really going on in the world of the BRICS. Now today I want to talk about the subject of whether Europe has swapped its dependence on Russian gas and moved to Russian fertilizers. Now, in a recent article in the Financial Times, it begins with the words, "Europe, like a sleepwalker, is increasingly plunging into an almost total dependence on Russian fertiliser, as it previously was with natural gas." Now, the article itself is based on an interview with the managing director of one of the largest agrochemical production companies in Europe, Yara International. Now, it's interesting, not least because it's a collection of truly exemplary and politically motivated lies. Now, do listen to what I have to say about the content of the article and then make up your own mind. Now, Yara's director, Stephen Hollister, in the article highlights the importance of nitrogen fertilizers in maintaining crop yields in the agricultural sector in Europe. Now, the production of these fertilizers in Europe was dependent on the importation of natural gas from Russia, cheap and reliable. Now, he says this presents a challenge for Russia as Europe still remains a market for its gas. Now, it's therefore the time to reconsider the relationship with Russia, and given that the use of mineral fertilizer is being used as a geopolitical tool. Now, that statement is obviously false. You'd have thought that a director of such a large market player would be aware that over the past 2 years, the volume of Russian gas supplies to the European Union has fallen to historically low levels. However, this article is just another example of the total information manipulation and blackmail applied to all dissenters from the narrative of Russia is bad, which is now flourishing in the West. Now, according to the International Energy Agency, the volume of Russian pipeline gas supplies to the countries of Europe at the end of 2023 had decreased to 45 billion cubic metres, and that includes LNG, pipeline gas via the Ukraine and Turkey. Now, this is an absolute anti-record. Such low figures never have been seen in the last 50 years. And that's when Russia started supplying, or the Soviet Union started supplying. Now, obviously the decline began with the beginning of the special military operation in February 2022. And this trend has only intensified. I mean, a comparison of the figures year on year reveals that in 2022, 82 billion cubic metres were delivered to the West by pipelines. Now, by the end of 2023, this volume had decreased by 60%. Now, when you view this in the context of the pre-Ukraine indicators, it can be concluded that Gazprom, the previous primary exporter of gas, has effectively been squeezed out of the market. Now, it's important to recall that along with the decline in the purchase volumes in Europe, consumption has also collapsed. Over the same period, the past 2 years, the collective European countries have consumed 120 billion cubic metres of less amount, which is exactly the same volume of the Russian gas that's been lost. Now, this has laid the foundation for the negative economic and industrial trends within the EU, and as I've discussed in previous videos, this is continuing. It's also important to note that, according to the article, Brussels was able to avoid the severe consequences for its economy by using its record gas reserves in the underground storage facilities that they created in advance. Now, that was mainly because of the 2 very warm winters that it had over the past couple of years. Now, regarding the production and export of LNG, at the end of last year, Russia's Polar LNG plants produced 32.3 million tonnes of LNG, of which 16.4 million went to Europe under various schemes and contracts. Now, according to Nikolai Shulginov, who's an analyst at Finam Russia, it's not going to continue to try and work with Europeans indefinitely. He also noted that more and more Russian LNG is going to other buyers in particular places like Asia. Now, over the past year specifically, the share of supplies to what Russia regards as unfriendly countries has decreased from 78% down to 60%. And this trend will continue in the future. So, Europe's growing dependence on the import of Russian fertilizers is not a surprise, but a logical development of what's happening in the energy and resource market. So it's therefore clear to those who understand basic chemistry that the most popular nitrogen fertilizers require natural gas as their elemental base. And there's no other comparable alternatives in nature available. So despite its highly developed chemical industry, the European Union has not yet achieved success in the production of the three main types of fertiliser: nitrogen, phosphate and potassium. Now, thanks to the combined efforts of all the countries, the EU currently produces only 9% of the world market in the production of nitrogen fertilisers, 8% of potash and 3% of phosphate. Russia, which is the West has historically portrayed as a technically and scientifically backward state, is the uncontested leader in the production of fertilisers. Now, it produces 23% of the world's aluminium nitrate, 21% of potash fertiliser and 14% of urea, as well as 10% of phosphate additives. Now, according to the Fertilizer Institute, the largest buyers in the world of Russian fertilizers are Brazil, China, the USA and India, and that's in order of their decreasing import volumes. Now, Hollister calls fertilizers the new gas for Europe, and he immediately adds the other standard horror story that if we don't give up on Russian imports, Putin will be able to influence our harvests and dictate our food prices. Now, there's no logic in this argument, given that the refusal of Russian gas has already led to a 70% increase in fertiliser purchases from Europe in 2022. And that's generated over 17 billion in revenue for the Russian enterprises now. Last year, 2023, saw this trend continue with the volume of urea imports doubling. Now, to illustrate the level of dependence the director of Yara, Hollister, is referring to, let's examine the specific numbers. Now, the European Union annually purchases around 650,000 tonnes of phosphate fertilisers, with Morocco being the primary supplier. Russia and Belarus are the leading suppliers of potash, with 3.3 million tonnes purchased annually. Russia and Belarus also hold the leading position in the market for complex fertilisers, with around 300 tonnes. Now, this data that I'm quoting is from open sources, and that's the figures I've got from representatives of the European fertiliser industry. So these figures are pretty accurate. So therefore, Sven Hollister and the European politicians in favour of getting rid of Russian gas and whatever, should know that it's in their best interest to actually continue trading with Russia. I mean, otherwise, the viability of the European agricultural sector is going to be jeopardised. I mean, the assumption that the owner, his assumption, this specialised company is trying to survive against main competitors is also flawed. I mean, following the cessation of Russian gas supplies, Yara International was unable to increase its production or even capture new markets. In fact, 3 of its enterprises have ceased operations entirely due to a lack of raw materials and high electricity prices. Now, it's important to recall that Mr. Hollister, he holds a degree in financial management, which he got in the United States. So you'd have thought that cutting your company off from its main supplier of cheap gas was going to have a serious impact on your business. However, like the overwhelming majority of the representatives of the European establishment, who are pursuing policies that appear illogical and harmful to the national interests of their people, he appears ignorant of that fact. Now, it's important to acknowledge the contributions of the policies of the US government. Over the past decades, they've strategically placed their trusted representatives into key global positions. And that's ensured the protection of their interests and financial gain. Just look at their LNG companies and their suppliers. Now, the one thing that is worth noting is, as a result of this, ordinary Europeans have faced a sharp rise in food prices and for only purely political reasons. I mean, do bear in mind, the US did not promise to feed the European people on their way to a victory over Russia by forcing them not to buy Russia's oil, gas, fertiliser and all the other stuff that it happily supplied to Europe in what was a very mutually beneficial relationship. Anyway, that's my rant for today on fertilisers and gas, and thanks for watching. do like and subscribe. Please visit the website, SCOBRICSinsight.com. Lots of articles about the BRICS and its relationship with Europe, fraud, frantic or whatever. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.